That driver's license that you have in your purse or your wallet, if I were to bet, I'd wager that you don't even think that you're carrying it around, whenever you leave home. Why would you? It's maybe smushed between your bank cards, your credit cards, maybe some cash, maybe that health coverage card, you name it. But what happens if you don't have legal identification? It's a situation that for some people goes way beyond just go fill out paperwork and get a replacement. Because what if you don't have a home? What if you don't have a car or anything that proves that you are you? Now, you might be thinking that this doesn't apply to you, but the reality is, even if it's not you, odds are you'll encounter someone in that situation, and that might surprise you as well. So our guests this week on In Focus to talk about all of this and more, we have Nicole Wilson, the District 1 Commissioner for Orange County. Commish, welcome to In Focus, of course. And we have Reverend Mary Downey, the founder and CEO of Hope Partnership. Ladies, thank you so much for joining us here on the show. This is such an interesting conversation. Commissioner, I want to start with you. This is an issue that I hear you are committed to. What drives you? Just what's the backstory with this involvement?
It's interesting. It came up during hurricane season. There were people who reached out to my office that were concerned that if they went to get sandbags, that they wouldn't be able to get sandbags if they didn't have a form of identification. That's not the case. And so I'm glad that we're getting an opportunity right now before we get back to hurricane season. It happened when people were seeking COVID vaccines and COVID supplies, where they reached out and said, I don't have an identification. I am a citizen. But it's missing. It's lost. It's been whatever. Every story is its own story. But it became really clear to me that as part of a health and safety initiative, making sure we're supporting people's ability to have those identification, forms of identification was important.
The reason that surprises you the most as to why they don't have an ID card is what?
Strangely enough, there are a million different reasons why people end up in that situation. And I think the most important takeaway is that if you are in that situation, you are likely, and this is a statistical report, and I'm sure you have more information about it, you're more likely not be able to afford to go through the process of getting replacement. So if you are in those circumstances because your family home burnt down and all of your birth certificates for your entire family were in there, and everything that you have that would have been evidence requires you to write away to some place for records and to pay a fine or fee.
Got it.
And fees for some of us, they seem incremental, but for some people that's a reason not to be able to replace them.
Just a chain of events, like the perfect imperfect storm. And Reverend, before we get into what Hope Partnership does, tell me your path to getting to where you are in this role.
Absolutely. I have been in this role for about 15 years as the founder and CEO. Before that, I worked in the local church and other nonprofits. I'm an ordained clergy person in the United Methodist Church. And my path to this work was really rooted in my own story and the fact that I experienced poverty and some youth homelessness when I was in college. And that really drove me to make sure that other people in our community have the right supports necessary so that they can overcome their poverty and have a safe place to call home.
Wow, so you've lived it, you get this. And I know, similarly, iDignity, formed by, I think it was 5 churches in the downtown area. Tell us some of the specifics. What do you do to help these people move forward?
Yeah, Hope Partnership has worked with iDignity in the past, and in the last couple of years we have brought that program into Osceola County as our own, called Hope IDs. And what basically happens both programs is we work together with the person who is lacking their ID to figure out what are the necessary steps that they need to get that ID back. And that can look very different, as the commissioner shared. That may be that they do not have access to their birth certificates, they do not have access to their social security card. A lot of times people also have to show, as we know, proof of residency. So if you're experiencing homelessness, that's very difficult to do. And so our organization partners with our local tax collector to be able to provide vouchers that say we verify that they're experiencing homelessness. And then finally, if you have a woman who has been married, they also have to have their marriage license. And so if you think about the fact that most women who are experiencing homelessness have also experienced domestic violence, when they leave their abuser, they are not taking their marriage license with them. And so they then may lose their ID, not have access to it for some reason. It may expire, and then it's time to re-up to a real ID, and they don't have that marriage license, and there's no way that they're going to be able to go back and get it.
Well, I was going to say, I think probably one of the most stunning examples in that space was an individual in Orange County whose abuser specifically targeted their information because it is a form of control. And so, understanding how debilitating it is not to have your own identification, they use that against their partner.
And hearing all this, you think of the stigma of this homeless person sitting on the corner as the one who doesn't have the identification, but it could be anyone just hearing these stories. So then how do we get pride? How do we get these folks to swallow that pride and to seek these resources?
I think in general, a lot of folks who are in these spaces are ready to get those IDs back because they see what a barrier it is. It's not just about getting a job even. A lot of times think like you need an ID to get a job, but it's also to move into housing, you have to have your ID. Even when we're working with people who, as you said, are in those spaces where they may be living in places unfit for habitation, when we're ready to move them into housing, we have to verify their identity. We can't move them into housing without those documents. That is a portion of the federal requirements. Yeah. And so if we have a person who may be living on the street and you maybe see that person every single day on your drive to work and you're like, why is this person not housed? It could be because it's taken us 18 months to 2 years to get them the ID necessary for them to qualify to move into housing.
And I know that a lot of folks who use, say, Goodwill, it also has something tangible to it where they provide the resources. How is this a little bit different than say a Goodwill with your resources?
Well, for us at Hope Partnership, our work encompasses everything around housing. So this is just a portion of that work because, again, an ID is a path towards housing. Goodwill is focusing more on job support. So for them, they would need that ID to begin that work at Goodwill.
And government tries to partner with so many of these organizations because, quite frankly, you don't want your government to embrace all of that under one roof.
Right.
It's really important that we have people who specialize, who have made it a life's work and a passion and a mission to do that type of service. And with our support, we get the most efficacy. And that is a critical link. We hear public-private partnerships a lot of times in the business community, but we really have an unbelievable strength in public-private partnerships in the nonprofit world and with our faith-based community.
And so as commissioner, what do you feel could be done better to make this partnership even more effective or even more visible?
I think it's interesting because when you said, what is it that we can do, why aren't they getting up and doing this? Or what is the hesitancy? I think people don't know where to start. I think it's a very overwhelming prospect to figure out I've been able to get away with this, or I haven't had to worry about it for some time. And then all of a sudden, life happens, right? You get a notice that you're going to have to move. You get a notice that you're getting laid off. And all of a sudden, the lack of that particular form of identification becomes a bigger issue. So I think educating, opportunities like this where we can tell people, hey, there are assistance, there's some help out there navigating these things in order to make sure that you are safely housed and that your employment isn't at risk. It's part of what I believe are the safety nets we provide in government services here in Orange County.
And I want to be able to visualize more of the process. Once you do seek the resources, what happens next? So, Reverend, obviously not giving up any personal information. I'm curious to know of a client story that really sits with you, and tell us about that and the journey and the success.
Yeah, there have been so many. We've been doing this work in Osceola County since 2016, and we have seen so many people come through our doors who their stories are also different. I think through just many of them that we've had, I think one of the ones that was probably the most difficult for us was a young man who had been in the foster care system. And he did not have access to his documents when he left the foster care system, and he had been moved around often, as sometimes children are in the foster care system. And so it was very difficult to track him, because when we think about how to do this, you have to go all the way back to the birth certificate. If the birth certificate, if we think about maybe some late with the SAVE Act and things like this, we want our birth certificate to match our IDs. If you're born, especially maybe in the foster care system, and you begin a process in the state, your birth certificate may not match whatever name you end up with. And so this young man had a different name than what was on his birth certificate. And so we could not get him an ID with that birth certificate. And so what our folks had to do was we had to walk backwards through his life and prove that the name that he was using was his actual name. So that meant that we needed to go through his school records, not necessarily for this young man, but for other people, we might look at their military records. We would look at possibly jail records if that was a case for someone. It's almost like they're private investigators who have to go back and prove this person's identity, start at the front, and then get the necessary documents after that. So it was probably one of our most difficult documents. We were able to get his ID. We're still in contact with this young man, a wonderful young man who is out living his life and no longer stuck in the process of not being able to move forward without an ID.
And that just seems like a lot. Can it be an expeditious process too? I mean, can it?
Yes.
Because that just seems, whoa.
Yes, it can be. And I think it's important for people to know that it is a both and.
Yes.
I think when we think about getting an ID, we think, oh, that's simple. I'll just go down to the tax collector's office and make it happen. And for many of us, that is the case. And even with people experiencing homelessness, especially if they've already gone through the real ID process, super easy for us to get that replacement ID, which is something that happens for us quarterly. We can even do it in-house when we partner with what's called the Florida Licensures on Wheels, which is called the Flow Bus. So a bus will come to us, and the people that we have who are document ready, they just walk on the bus, they print that ID, and they walk back off with it the same day.
Wow, that's encouraging.
And so there are people that we can get ready, and it can happen fast, and there are some people that it can take a very long time. Every person's story is different.
Indeed, indeed. And Commissioner, I know the Commission gave iDignity a grant, and I'm just wondering, have you seen that work? Have you seen that money, bring success?
Yes.
And what else kind of conversations are you having with your colleagues to move this further?
Yeah, so it's interesting because to the point that that you heard about what complexities can lay in front of somebody, from the space of trying to get budget items allocated to these needs that we have, with the goal of making sure everybody out there can be housed, employed, and live their best, most successful lives. It's really a big picture thing, right? So we do support the Homeless Services Network. We do make sure that we have employment opportunities available where we may be able to work through some of these things with our partners. Certificate programs for education that work through some of these programs before somebody has the ability to really bring forward what they might need if they were to walk into a different certificate type program. So I actually a few years ago brought forward the possibility of a community IDs program, and it was something that came to me from, like I said, speaking to people during hurricane season, but also our trans community was really struggling with being able to move forward with who their identity is at this current time, in relation to what their birth certificate established. And so knowing that everything is tied to that birth certificate, this would provide something that had a photo of who they are now, but it wasn't considered a legal identification for travel or for banking activity. But it would work for things like visiting a loved one in a hospital. Checking, your child out of school.
I was going to say it was for school as well.
Because and that is a real struggle for our trans community. And so I brought forward the topic as a discussion item. My board was supportive in exploring it. Law enforcement was actually supportive of exploring it because they don't like showing up at any scene and not knowing who's there.
Exactly.
And so for them, identification is a safety, on-site safety issue. So we were actually in the midst of exploring other programs that were similar or successes, or how we could even be more robust in the implementation of some of the support services that we already had. And then a state law was passed that preempted those efforts.
So, yeah, tell me more about the state's impact or influence on this. So, the county to the state, what kind of communication do you guys have, if any?
Well, clearly we're a subset of the federal and state government, and therefore the issues of things like proper identification for voting and for travel, those are federal issues, and rightfully should have partnership and collaboration in establishing those federal documents, and to be able to replace documents that are missing. The community ID wasn't an idea to supplant that. It was an idea to help support that, because sometimes if that takes years, what are we doing in the meantime? And then for those who were struggling sort of in a different space,
Sure.
It provided them the opportunity to locally have a photo identification for their own use. So I think that sadly, many of the things that we are addressing locally that we feel really strongly will benefit our community, they get preempted at the state level with a blanket idea, but not all communities are alike. And the challenges that each community faces, local government gets to hear about those challenges. And I feel like local government has such a critical role in a space like this, where we are really working hard to get to our housing issues, our homelessness issues, our hunger, the things that we understand we need to address to lift people to the next step, get them, employment, and then make sure that employment leads them to a successful future. And so to be told by the state we're not doing it the right way is tough, because we listen to our constituency, but we have to work within the limits of the law and make sure that we're providing everything we can in that structure. So, we do really support our nonprofit partners in this space and trying to listen to them when they need more support.
Right. This is fascinating. This is the first time we've done this topic on the show, and amazing insight. Something we don't talk about a lot, but it probably affects more people than we think. So I'm curious to know, ladies, what has been the impact of Real ID on all of this? Because, I thought Real ID, Reverend, was supposed to make this all easier.
Yeah, the Real ID Act was originally instated around terrorism. It was meant to help communities know that the people who were getting their IDs were who they said that they were. And so it came about in about 2011. And what it did, on one side, its intent was very good. It was to keep us safe. But the impact disenfranchised a lot of people who just could not afford the documents necessary to get that Real ID. And so when we think about it, it's not necessarily even people experiencing homelessness. It's anybody who doesn't already have those documents necessary. Again, that birth certificate, that social security card, that marriage license, that residency. And if they don't have those documents, as you said earlier, those fees add up. And so it's very difficult even to think about the fact that you might need $120 to go get your ID. And so when we think through policy changes, sometimes when we make broad blanket statements and things of those sorts, what happens is there's always people who are negatively impacted. And the Real ID Act did actually disenfranchise a lot of people. And so when iDignity, who had started in 2008, I believe is when they started, they were doing their program very different. And when Real ID started, they also had to shift how they do their work.
Oh, I understand. Commissioner, about a minute left. What's your final takeaway? Maybe some folks know of people who are struggling right now. What do they do?
Well, that's it. Reach out. I think to hear that we have community resources available. I also think that in a very practical sense, this might be your signal to go make sure you've got all your papers.
Yes.
Do this for a loved one. If you know somebody who may be vulnerable, who has health issues, who has potentially going through some tough times, get those big waterproof Ziploc bags, find a safe place. And it seems very old-fashioned and archaic, but really it comes down to sometimes those historic documents within your family and having those readily available to somebody that can really provide a fast path and a least expensive route to making sure we can get somebody their identification.
And you have 2 brick and mortar locations, Reverend, in
For us,
Osceola?
the best thing to do would be go to our website and
Cool.
give us an email or a call, and we can get that process started. I do want to say, for anybody who's wondering, do I have a real ID? It's really easy to check. Just pull out your ID, and if you have a little gold star on it, then you're good to go.
I'll be checking mine just out of curiosity on that one. Commissioner and Reverend, thank you so much for your time. Great insight. We really appreciate it.
Thank
Come
you
back
for
anytime.
having me.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. To keep up with important issues impacting our communities and hear more conversations with the people who are shaping the future, subscribe to our channel. You can also download our app or find Spectrum News on your TV for balanced, in-depth political coverage and more.